Chapter 15. Our Brains. The barn across the street was burning, fire shooting out of the roof, black smoke choking the afternoon sky, horses bolting out. Annie saw the flames first and ran to get her boots. She knew those horses and wanted to help. Most of them ran to their fenced-in pasture, but a few got loose onto the quiet street heading for town. Bruce and the boys, home from college, followed Annie while I stayed back with the potatoes in the oven, and with my brother. It was Thanksgiving Day. As Mike and I stood at the sliding door watching a small crowd of neighbors gather near the farm 500 feet away, I wondered how much he remembered of Dad's wake, those turkey dinners in styrofoam containers. Mike was silent until under his breath, in a matter-of-fact tone, he said, "I heard a guy from over there. He's stuck in the bathroom and can't get out of the barn." "There are plenty of helpers," I said. "I'm sure they'll get everyone out." I wasn't sure at all. Soon a fire truck lit up the subdivision. Mike moved to the adjacent family room and sat in front of the TV, where earlier he'd been watching football with Ethan and Ben. "Hey," he'd said to them, "did you guys know that I invented the crock pot?" "Oh, that's great." They weren't trying to be rude. It's hard to know how to respond to his delusions. During the next commercial, Mike assured them that they never needed to worry about money. The whole family was set for life because he had $1 million in a secret bank account from his company called Roscoe Industries. Roscoe was the name of the street where our father had lived as a child. "Okay," they said, not looking at him. They both had stayed out late with friends the night before and were especially reticent today, but I don't think Mike noticed. "Hey, you guys have great parents, you know that? They're smart, and they gave you this big house and raised you guys good. And the dogs, they've got the whole backyard to run around in." "Yep." "It's true," I yelled from the kitchen, happy to have everyone home, Annie chopping at the island while Bruce and I bustled to get the meal ready. "I, especially, am pretty damn smart." "Well, mostly I meant Bruce," Mike said. We all laughed. "Seriously, Kim," he said, "you're a college professor. That's pretty cool. I tell all the people at the nursing home that my sister is a professor, and they're like, 'Wow, that's cool.'" "Thanks," I said. "That makes me feel good." 30 seconds of silence. "Hey, did you guys know that I'm Pope Pius IV?" I set the table and waited for Bruce and the kids to return with news of the fire. Mike began laughing at some commercial. This potato chip ad wasn't funny, but Mike's laughter grew louder, bigger, maniacal, his face red and contorted as he kept howling through the end of that commercial and into the next. "What's so funny?" I asked, hiding my alarm. "Huh?" he said, winding down the laughter as if coming out of a spell. "Nothing." He kept staring at the TV. You wouldn't get it. I was certain this extreme reaction was associated with the fire, a release of fear and worry. Laughter didn't make sense. He was out of control and his brain was playing tricks on him. Schizophrenia and ADHD are similar in some ways. They're both genetic, both show subtle developmental differences in brain structure, both deal with an imbalance of neurotransmitters, and for both the cause is unknown. But there is a correlation with environmental factors, such as childhood lead exposure and prenatal tobacco exposure. Recent evidence shows a similar gene mutation in both childhood ADHD and adult schizophrenia. My understanding is that 2 siblings could be born with this mutated gene, and for one kid, the gene causes schizophrenia, for the other, merely ADHD. Thanksgiving night, after I'd returned him to the nursing home and Bruce had cleaned up the kitchen, I called Mike to let him know that no people or horses had been hurt. The fire was in a small hay barn behind the main structure. It wasn't a big deal. "Okay, good," he said, without obvious emotion. "I heard someone yelling, but they must have found him." "Everyone's fine," I repeated. I often wonder what's going on inside his head. At Mom's funeral, he insisted on speaking. The service was 5 years ago on December 22nd, the visitation room filled with dozens of folding chairs facing a lectern up by the casket. A few of Mom's old friends had started driving from Tinley Park, an hour away, but they'd turned around instead of getting on the expressway. The night was too dark and the roads too slippery for 3 women in their 70s and 80s. Most of the mourners who could make it to the service were friends of mine. I have a small family. The only blood relatives present, other than my kids, were Mike, whom my boys had picked up from his nursing home before the roads got bad, and James, Mike's 15-year-old son, who had been living at my house the previous year after his mother, also mentally ill, could no longer care for him. Mike wore a wine-colored polo with khakis, tube socks, and white gym shoes. In the disorder of the past 2 days, I had forgotten to help him arrange an outfit, but he looked good. James wore a dark suit, a hand-me-down. They're both tall and slim, and they both had the hawk-like forehead I recognized in a picture of my Irish grandfather. James inherited the forehead and, apparently, the ADHD. After he'd had some trouble in school, I took him to the clinic. Now the medicine was helping him get better grades. Before Mom's funeral, Mike and James had spoken to each other only a few times ever. When James knew Mike was coming to visit our house, he would escape to stay with friends. Despite my attempts to explain, he didn't understand schizophrenia and saw his father's neglect as a choice. But this night they sat together, facing each other, in a cluster of folding chairs. I stood by the coffin, receiving guests, so I don't know what they said to each other. I saw Mike laugh, one tooth on top, one on bottom. His teeth had rotted away and he hated the feeling of dentures, so his cheeks wore the hollowed-out look of an old man. I hoped that James would come to accept his father despite the crazy brain. In the first speech of the service, I read a poem I had written about my mom, trying to celebrate her unconventional ways. Many of my friends knew her well and liked her quirky, free spirit. I wrote from an English teacher's perspective. You are not an academic essay, whose ideas flow one to the next. You are not a well-structured paragraph. I gave light-hearted examples of her spaciness, then described my favorite memory, the time she went camping with us and came out of the horrid-smelling, vomit-inducing outhouse and said, "Boy, the air out here is fresh." I said that instead of an essay, she was a poem in free verse. Your off-rhymes are internal, your rhythm erratic. A renegade metaphor, you force us to look again and laugh an epiphany. When I finished, I looked at Mike in the front row of seats, wondering if he really wanted to speak in front of everyone. He stood up and approached the lectern, so I took the chair next to Bruce and held my breath. In a strong, steady baritone, Mike addressed the crowd. My mom appeared as an angel in my dream last night. Bruce squeezed my hand. She told me, "Mike, at my funeral, I want you to read Robert Frost." He had nothing on paper, and I've never known him to read poetry. I'm almost certain the idea had arrived just moments before. But I had decided not to interfere, no matter what. He had a right to grieve his own mother. What he recited wasn't exactly Frost, but it was fluid and convincing, a paraphrased hybrid of The Road Not Taken and Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, poems he must have learned in high school 30 years earlier. Toward the end, he remembered the "miles to go before I sleep" line, then transitioned to an image of peaceful death. It was remarkable and comforting. In the years leading up to her death, my mother had made me promise to take care of Mike. "You've got to," she said once from her wheelchair, eyes boring into me as if she could see me searching for a way out. "He needs you." The day after the funeral, Mike called me. With eagerness, he said, "What's next?" I didn't know what he meant. I didn't know how to respond. Mike turned 56 this January. For his birthday, he asked for another new radio. Through the years, I had given him several jam boxes, portable stereos that played CDs and tuned in classic rock stations he'd been listening to since we were kids. When I'd visited him at Christmas, I saw the latest stereo sitting on the cafeteria's ice machine, its silver telescoping antenna broken down to just a nib at the top. It still worked for CDs, but couldn't play the radio without its aerial receiver. Mike explained that one of the patients kept snapping it off. I raised my eyebrows. With just a hint of a smile, he said, "She's got a thing about antennas." Every once in a while, I catch a glimmer of his old self. With Mom gone, I am Mike's only link to the world outside of his nursing home, the only link to his past. Oh, I'm sure if I were hit by a truck tomorrow, Bruce and the kids would look after him, but they didn't know him when he was sane. What Mike really wanted for his birthday, he told me half joking, was a cell phone. He'd seen the younger guys at the nursing home pulling up song after song, whatever they wanted to hear. It was 2020 and Mike had never owned a mobile phone. For years I'd resisted buying him one because I was worried he would cause trouble with it, the way he'd done one late night about 15 years ago from a different nursing home. He'd called the police in my town to report that Bruce, the kids, and I were being held hostage by an intruder. Surprised at the late doorbell, Bruce and I answered in our pajamas and had to convince 2 officers that there was no criminal holding a gun to our heads. My brother has paranoid schizophrenia, I explained, hoping they would stay outside on the porch because the house was a disgrace. If you don't mind, we'd like to step in and take a look. He means well, but he's delusional. I followed them to the kitchen. Really, I said, we're fine. As they scanned the jagged mounds of dirty dishes and masses of junk covering every bit of the large island, I imagined them recording evidence to the contrary. Chaos convoluted my life on a good day. I didn't need Mike piling more on. Another reason I hadn't bought him a cell phone was that Mike routinely gives away his belongings. Whenever I hand him cash to spend on snacks and cigarettes, there's a good chance he'll pass it on to someone he thinks needs it more than he does. His level of empathy is high. Before a recent visit, he asked me to bring him a pair of women's pants, size 14-16, he said, for an older lady who just arrived and only has one outfit. At Christmas, I took him to Target to pick out his gift, and he chose a ceramic mug that said, "Good morning, sunshine," because one of the techs could use some cheering up. After my unsuccessful guardianship case, I worried that he would leave this nursing home to get lost in the streets. But he had stayed put for almost 10 years. With this stability, I decided it was time for a cell phone. I knew he'd probably give it away or leave it out for another patient or maybe even an employee to steal, but I had to try. Without it, he was left behind, isolated in delusions, while the rest of us Facebooked old friends and Googled every little thing. Besides, the phone was free with a $10 a month line added to our account, and I could limit the numbers he'd be able to reach, minimizing the trouble he could cause. Bruce and I sat with Mike in the nursing home cafeteria while he opened his presents. Tearing away paper from the phone's rectangular box, he smiled big. "No way," he said. "Awesome." After my quick orientation, teaching him how to text and make calls, I had already entered contact info for me and the kids. He began exploring the Spotify app, which provided access to any music he wanted, classic rock as well as the new stuff. He had studied computers at a local college in the mid-'80s after his schizophrenia was somewhat controlled, and Mom had bought an Apple IIe for his bedroom, but now everything was different. With big, clumsy fingers, through trial and error, he found the right amount of pressure to plunk out letters and backspace and fix mistakes. He was eager but patient, and so was I, resisting the urge to do it for him. Finally he entered, "Waiting on a Friend," into the tiny Spotify search box. He knew it was my favorite song from when I was young. Mike placed the phone between us on the table so we could both listen, and with the first tinny beats of piano, then Mick Jagger's bird-like coos, I was carried back into childhood, to the familiar chaos of our old house. Mike closed his eyes, bobbing his head to the memories. After decades of fearing his illness and feeling inept because despite my education and wealth I can't fix him, after all the guilt for being the sane one and the jealousy because he was Dad's favorite and, although I would never say this out loud, because he monopolized Mom's attention, after all that, I enjoyed relaxing a bit and just being friends with my brother. Walking out of the nursing home, I told Bruce, "If the phone gets stolen tomorrow, it will still have been worth it." Chapter 16, 0 milligrams. At a routine exam, my general physician hears a heart murmur. 3 weeks later, an echocardiogram shows that my left atrium is mildly dilated, and the doctor sends an electronic message, "Need to wean you off of Vyvanse." The medication raises blood pressure, causing too much stress on my heart. Her plan is that in a few weeks, when this bottle of 50 milligram pills is empty, I will go down to 40 milligrams for 1 month, then 30, then 20, then 10. After that, my brain and I are on our own. My plan, though, as I notice every thump of my enlarged heart and think of my father's fatal attack when he was 6 years younger than I am now, is to stop the medication immediately, despite the inevitably rough withdrawal, which, Google informs me, will include shakiness, sweating, trouble sleeping, irritability, anxiety, depression. After taking 50 milligrams of Vyvanse or something similar once a day for nearly 15 years, I've developed a dependence. Also, though, I have created a good life. I'm comfortable with who I am and what I've accomplished. The kids are all in college. I'm in control of my health as much as one can be. I earned full professor this year. I have good friends, and I'm working just for fun on a second master's degree. There are only 2 things that worry me about living without ADHD medication. 1, the transition, and 2, the rest of my life. Transition. 2 weeks off Vyvanse. 1. 30 years ago, when I was a graduate assistant learning to teach, one student evaluation complained that in class I clung to my lesson plan, that I'd be lost without it. These days, I still write a list before each class to focus my mind on what's ahead. Yesterday, I was preparing for the semester's second meeting of English 101. I don't know these students yet, and their inevitable judgment of me is distracting. Will they find me scattered, predictable, weird? I'm not myself lately. Half an hour before class, I labored through a simple list of 5 items, beginning with take roll. In class, I called their names. Then I looked at the list. I'd written a number 2, followed by a blank space. Then down a line to number 3, collect assignments. Then 4, discuss sample essay. And 5, ask for paper topics. But what the hell was number 2? 2. Last week, in a pre-semester faculty meeting, the keynote was an outsider hired for our edification. As she talked about student engagement, I sat in front trying to listen. Janet and Sarah, 2 of my colleagues, whispered a conversation at the other side of my table. So disrespectful, I thought. What were they talking about? I looked around to see if others were bothered by this. They all stared up at the speaker. They all laughed. I didn't know why. 3. I'm swearing in my head a lot. This is unlike me, as I've never been one to curse. Once, when I was driving through town and someone cut me off, I muttered, "What the hell?" And my teenagers were shocked by the uncharacteristic vulgarity. It's fine for them, but they know it's just not who I am. Today, in my office, I said a silent, "Fuck you," to my computer when another reboot for update message dings and flashes. I'll deal with it later. I close the dialog box, stare at the screen, and attempt to resume my task. Was I reading email? Why did I open Word? I notice the red voicemail light on my desk phone. I go to punch in the 4-digit extension to retrieve the message, but this number, which hasn't changed in 27 years, is nowhere in my head. Jesus Christ, I say to the mailroom door, whose lock won't open. My mailbox was always in the next room over. 3 years ago, they moved it to another building. Then they added a lock to that door, where we had to punch in the room number followed by the floor number. Got it. But now we each have a personal code, which apparently was in an email. For today, I asked the new secretary where the central outbox is, the one that for 2.5 decades has sat right here by the coffee maker and copy machine. This needs to go out today, I explain unnecessarily, showing her the manila envelope. I don't tell her that really it should have been out yesterday, but I forgot. "Oh, it's in 107 now," she says, as if it's that easy. This door, too, takes the individual password. God damn, I just want to mail a fucking envelope. The dean, my boss, is walking past and sees me staring at the keypad. She stops. "Just trying to mail an envelope," I say, and wonder if she hears the chaos in my head. "There was an email," she says. "Oh," I reply. After a beat, she looks around to make sure we are alone and says, "It's the last 6 characters of your X number." And she stands there while I try to think it through. What is my X number backwards? No, start forwards. X00, she's still watching me. X000. I'm watching the wall thinking, damn, this should be easy. She starts to say something, then doesn't. Maybe I should just walk away, feign the flu, and run to the bathroom. 040392. The door opens. Jesus Christ. 4. I'm bombarded with desperate messages from students wanting to enroll in my closed classes. Their situations are all dire. For one, this course is the last requirement to graduate in May. Another needs my online section because he's homebound, caring for his dying grandpa. A third student understands if I can't accept her, but she heard I was an amazing teacher and would hate to miss out on the awesome opportunity to learn from me. Insincere, yes, but recently the dean has not been scheduling enough sections. God forbid we have a few classes that aren't bursting to capacity. Students first, my ass. Bottom line first is more like it. After telling 2 of the supplicants, "I'm sorry, the class is full," I realize that someone must have dropped. I do have one opening in 102. Once the semester has begun, a student needs my permission to add a class, so I have to figure out who contacted me first and which class they are interested in. Between 3 phone messages and several emails, some sent directly to me, others through the dean, I just don't know where to start. And there's plenty real work needing attention. In Intro to Poetry, I've adopted a new textbook. Why the hell did I change books? Now I need to revise the whole semester schedule and fit it into the goddamn new syllabus template that is nothing but a pain in the ass. My desk is a mess. Instead of organizing, I write this list. 5. I know what being in control feels like. The confidence, the smooth movement through a day. Normally I'd enter Bodie Hall erect, with a proud stride, like I'm everything I'm supposed to be. I have something of value to offer the world, and know just how to do it. I'd breathe in and look around with gratitude at the familiar surroundings. These laminated floors down this long, bright hallway, classrooms with their smart projectors and whiteboards, this office with a corner desk and a big window. This, I'd think, is who I am. But this semester, I'm different. Today, I lost my balance while standing still. The words I say to a colleague overlap each other as they exit my mouth. 6. I've never fully understood addiction. Alcoholics annoy me with their booze-induced banter and fake personalities. Just be who you really are, I think. But here I am, longing for a pill to make me who I really am. The rest of my life. One of the defining moments of my undergrad education was in a Shakespeare class, where I learned that most of his plays begin with chaos and work toward order. The drama of these stories is in the characters' process of untangling the pandemonium/turmoil/anarchy/discord as they work toward a resolution of control, peace, law, calm, discipline. As I was 20 years old and had fled my mother's house for the university 4 hours away. Dad was dead, Mike had gone crazy, Mom was vacant, our nice suburban house overrun by burnouts, dogs, and garbage. This literary theory gave me a framework to understand the complexity of Shakespeare, sure, but it was also something I could apply to life in general. I couldn't articulate it then, but I had begun my goal for adulthood: turn my childhood chaos into order. This is why our pediatrician's label of quality person hit such a strong note with me. A quality person was one who could transform the chaos of infant jaundice into a page of line graphs showing energy input and energy output. Because of my ADHD brain and my childhood lack of structure, a life of order and routine had never felt natural to me. With the help of Bruce's logic over the years and of Vyvanse, I was able to wear some grooves into the path of my life. Keys in the basket every time, purse always on the desk, For years, the same style of purse, same brand of underwear and shoes, same parking spot. This predictable repetition gave me direction. The fewer choices I had to make, the less I struggled. For the past few years, I've felt close to the peaceful resolution, the happy ending of those Little House on the Prairie episodes I loved as a kid. Without Vyvanse, though, fighting the chaos of my brain is like swimming upstream, the constant battle exhausting. It turns out that an orderly resolution happens only in fiction. Another defining moment of my undergrad was the time Mom visited my dorm around the same time as the Shakespeare class, and she pointed out that word, entropy, on the elevator wall. I didn't understand why Mom, as if the word had some special meaning for her, as if she were sharing some big idea, suddenly came to life. Do you know that word? It's the way things naturally turn to chaos. We had never talked about puberty or college plans, but entropy was something she wanted to teach. I supposed the word reminded her of science classes. She'd been an obedient scholar and had the vocabulary to prove it. She was proud of her knowledge, proud that she had graduated near the top of her class in nurses' training. In one way, Mom was similar to a Shakespeare character. Born into the chaos of her father's suicide, she worked her way to an orderly life. The obedient nurse marries an educated man, creates a family, buys a house in the suburbs. In real life, the story doesn't end there. In reality's Act 2, the blind husband dies young. One of their kids hears voices, the other can't think straight. And in Act 3, our heroine dies of a brain tumor while yearning for a better life. Entropy is the opposite of Shakespeare. I can't help thinking, though, that Mom found more value in entropy than just pride in her vocabulary. I find myself wanting to know more about this term, and am intrigued by an article by James Clear, author of the New York Times bestseller Atomic Habits, who says, "The ultimate purpose of life, mind, and human striving is to deploy energy and information to fight back the tide of entropy and carve out refuges of beneficial order. Fighting chaos is the ultimate purpose of life. I see now that entropy is a universal struggle. My personal chaos happens to be a messy house and fuzzy thinking, executive dysfunction. Another woman might wrestle against alcoholism or obsessive tidying." Evolutionary biologists use a term called mismatch conditions to describe when an organism is not well suited for a condition it is facing. We have common phrases for mismatch conditions, like a fish out of water or bring a knife to a gunfight. Obviously, when you're in a mismatch condition, it is much more difficult to succeed, to be useful, and to win. It is likely you'll face mismatch conditions in your life. At the very least, life will not be optimal. Maybe you didn't grow up in the optimal culture for your interests. Maybe you were exposed to the wrong subject or sport. Maybe you were born at the wrong time in history. It is far more likely that you are living in a mismatched condition than in a well-matched one. Knowing this, you must take it upon yourself to design your ideal lifestyle. You have to turn a mismatched condition into a well-matched one. Optimal lives are designed, not discovered. When we fight entropy, we create moments of peace. Clear says, "In a universe where entropy rules the day, the presence of life with organization, structure, and stability is stunning. Each good day is a miracle that we need to appreciate." I'm leaning toward the belief that contentment lies somewhere between chaos and order. Contentment lies in the search for order, not the attainment of it. After all, Shakespeare's plays are interesting for the untangling. The drama ends when order is restored because the chaos, not the order, is what's most interesting. Nobody cares about the happy ever after. If we're lucky, we never stop pushing against the chaos because when the chaos is finally cured, when life is no struggle at all, we're dead. Life itself is chaos. Chapter 17, Fresh Eyes. Bruce fertilizes the lawn on schedule, kills weeds before they pop up. When I'm out at night, he turns on the porch lights, to welcome me home, and as I drive in, I'm struck by the beauty of my house. Red brick and gray cedar create a sophisticated look, while my white wraparound porch prevents it from being snooty. We pay a monthly cleaning service now, and Bruce does the daily kitchen chores, but still, our house looks better from the outside. When Annie brought her new boyfriend home from college, I looked around with fresh eyes. The family room's 20-year-old blue carpet is spotted with the white fuzz of chewed-up dog toys and little bits of yellow frisbee. We hardly notice clumps of blonde fur tumbling in the air-conditioned breeze. The fancy plaid recliner has been scratched to threads by 3 cats, the apothecary coffee table a victim of our puppy, its corners gnawed to splinters. In the kitchen, on the wall above the stove, are 2 metal flowers covered in a greasy film. By the sliding door to the deck is our pesticide corner, where Bruce keeps 7 bottles of insect spray and weed killer on a small, decorative stand. The side counter holds a computer that hasn't worked for 2 years, a stack of reusable grocery bags that need to go back in my car, a tennis racket, Ben's knee brace, and a beautiful ceramic vase full of flowers that have been dead for a week and a half. Instead of hiding in shame, I told the boyfriend, "I hope you'll find us charmingly unconventional," and we laughed. The women I admire these days own their space without apology. 2 of my best friends are artists, and they've got some weird stuff inside. Jennifer arranges creepy little baby heads on a shelf in her dining room. She and her artistic daughters just love them. Jane proudly displays funny ceramic penises behind her kitchen faucet. Both of these women go crazy for green moss, which sits in pots around the home, decorated with tiny animal bones. Whatever, it makes sense to them. I've decided that I'm done impersonating a normal woman with a normal house. Like my friends, I can open the door to let the world know who I really am. Epilogue. The results are in. My brain map patterns are consistent with someone with ADHD. On a scale of mild, moderate, moderate-severe, and severe, I'm in the deep end of moderate. Off of Vyvanse for 2 months now, I have a decision to make. Do I try the neurofeedback treatment package for $5,000? Neurofeedback trains the brain to focus. With sensors placed over the areas of my brain that are out of tune, I'll watch a movie in the doctor's office. When the brain waves are balanced, the movie plays normally, but if one's attention drifts, the movie dims and mutes, prompting the brain to wake up and continue its exercises. My map results make me a candidate for 40 sessions of neurofeedback, after which, according to the doctor's handout, I could notice improved alertness, attention, emotional regulation, behavior, cognitive function, memory, sleep, and mental flexibility. Health insurance doesn't pay for neurofeedback, even though recent studies, posted on the U.S. government's NIH website, prove that it's an effective alternative to ADHD medication. The problem is that there's no regulation of neurofeedback clinicians. My doctor, the one who posted the ad on Facebook for an $80 brain map, like cars, brains need a tune-up, could be an untrained quack. After meeting him and studying his qualifications, though, I do believe he knows his stuff. At the same time I'm considering paying thousands for neurofeedback, Bruce and I are talking about buying me a desk from the Amish furniture store. After window shopping for several years, the one I've chosen is an L shape with a lighted hutch in honey-stained cherry. It's gorgeous. Currently, I spend several hours a day writing and teaching online classes at my perfectly adequate particle board snapped-together desk that 30 years ago Bruce and I bought in a box from Target, whose sharp edges irritate my wrist when I type and whose one drawer is broken and sitting on the floor. It's fine. The Amish desk costs about as much as their neurofeedback. With 3 kids in college, we can't afford both. At the same time that I'm choosing between desk and iffy brain treatment, a CBS Sunday morning segment on Louisa May Alcott says that 150 years ago, society deemed it improper for a woman to want her own desk, unnecessary for cooking and cleaning. Louise's father found society's prejudice ridiculous and built his daughter a desk. This foot-wide half-moon shelf, big enough for one piece of paper and an inkwell, was where she wrote Little Women. I don't need a fancy desk. Anyway, if my brain doesn't work, what good is a desk? Often I'm frustrated by the sense that taking Vyvanse made me a better thinker, more efficient, more productive than I am without the drug. Writing, which has always been my special thing, stresses me out now. The brain map was originally just for fun, an experiment to see what I could see with no plan to spend more than the $80. Now that Vyvanse isn't an option, though, neurofeedback is more alluring, because life is better when it's in focus. I'm open to anything that will bring clarity. Functional medicine podcasts are full of ideas, and when I talk about these many potential brain influences, my family says I'm obsessed. On a good day, the regimen starts with 8 morning pills, supplements prescribed by Dr. Sexton, a functional medicine physician I've been seeing for 8 months, who says that mucuna and catechostin are especially helpful with dopamine absorption and focus. When the weather is nice, I then step outside with the dogs and slip off my shoes. Bare feet on grass, I point my face to the sun, its energy a boost of serotonin. At the end of a shower, I count to 30, quickly, under cold, cold, cold water to activate my nervous system. Next, I mix a cup of bulletproof coffee with Dave Asprey's Bulletproof Brain Octane Oil and a bit of grass-fed butter. Healthy fats feed the brain and bring me closer than anything to the focus of Vyvanse. On the way to work, I open my sunroof to let in some vitamin D, even in Chicago's winter. On campus, I park in the farthest lot and remove my glasses, which have sun-blocking transition lenses, to wake my brain as I walk in. Before checking email, a brief meditation. Breathe in and out. In and out. At noon, a Fitbit alarm reminds me to take another mucuna. Lunch is a protein shake with more brain octane oil from a single-serve packet in my file drawer. I tape a paper over the office door window and stretch through some cat-cows, then bend into a forward fold. Breathe in and out. After work, I'll make my first meal of the day as a form of intermittent fasting, trying to stick to keto. I'm maintaining most of the 70-pound loss of 4 years ago, but it's a struggle. After relaxing my strict diet, I'm fighting cravings again. At 6 p.m., a reminder pops up on my phone. Keto solves everything. The low-carb state of ketosis improves my heart, my weight, and my brain. At 8 p.m., which is my danger zone for overeating, another reminder. What would Maria do? Maria is my friend who never, ever, ever eats flour or sugar. She once walked out of our restaurant meal because the waiter couldn't offer sugar-free salad dressing. At 9, I take more supplements. In bed, I use Somnifix strips to tape my mouth closed as I sleep. Nose breathing, I learned from Dr. Mark Hyman's podcast, is linked to optimal cognitive performance. Am I obsessed? Maybe. But I'm no blind disciple sending all my cash to the televangelists. I find experts I trust who base their recommendations on the latest science. I do my best to understand, and, knowing that I do have some control over my brain, I give it a try. If their technique doesn't work for me, I let it go. On a good day, when I've done everything I know to do, I can think very well. In fact, sometimes I feel better than I did on medication, as if a heaviness has been lifted. I'm a bit more impulsive, which can be a good thing. In a big faculty meeting recently, I raised my hand for the mic 3 times because I didn't think myself out of speaking. Also, my tennis game seems to have improved. I move around now by instinct more than calculated strategy. My body knows what to do, and when I'm playing like this, I feel young again. Sometimes I forget that I did live 40 years without Vyvanse. As long as I keep working toward clarity, refusing surrender to brain fog, I'll be okay. Yes, I'll try neurofeedback eventually. I've decided my dilemma isn't an either-or situation. I can choose one option this year and the other option when I've saved more money. For now, I'm buying the beautiful desk. When sitting there at the keyboard, I'll try to ease my expectations. At my age, I've already done the most demanding work, raised the kids, established a career. Now I can relax a bit, follow my instincts, go wherever my weird brain takes me.